this meeting on Zoom under Chapter 30A, Section 20B, emergency COVID order using virtual technology, and all votes will be taken by a roll call. And the meeting will be recorded, which I suppose is important to say out loud because that's a whole other statutory thing. So I've called the meeting to order. I'll engage in a roll call. Gina Stino.
Present.
Fran Collins. Present. Jean Dippold.
Present.
Helene Lieb.
Present.
Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
Meg Wheeler.
Present.
And the chair is present, and Lee Jenkins has not yet or will not be joining us. I don't know which. So the agenda includes a budget review, generally, and forecast and shared expenses, and then the Cohasset Fire Department, anything relating to the draft warrant. I'd like to, under the umbrella of the review of draft warrant, talk non-substantively about scheduling some of the groups that need to come before us. I had calls with folks regarding both the town hall project and the zoning changes that are proposed by the planning board and the master plan implementation bylaws subcommittee. And the good news is that there aren't as many substantive issues on the ladder for us to consider. The bad news is that they probably are fairly complex on the two zoning articles that actually will require some analysis. So that said, Chris and Don, we'll hand it off to you for a presentation on what we're looking at in terms of a budget to recommend for a town meeting.
So I believe tonight our look is going to be at the shared budget side, which Don will be able to get a lot more in depth on than we did on Tuesday. And I'm trying to find where we go. And then also any question about the revenue side. Do you want to pop this up? I have this ready to go, Don. I'll put up the 5-year forecast. You're muted.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. You should all have copies of this, but I'll display this here.
Sorry, bear with me. I was just sending an email to Chief Sylvia. So what do you think, Chris? Should I just run through quickly what I kind of presented last week, or?
Yeah,
I don't want to duplicate efforts in regards to people's time either.
I think I'll let Rob. How do you want to proceed? You want us just to go take a walk through this, and then we'll drill down on some of the big expenses in the shared budget?
I think a very summary walk. I think many of us were in the meeting last week, and then I would focus on the areas of that are need some any of the big changes one way or the other, matters of concern, bad trends, good trends. But yeah, you can just take us across the highlights real quick.
All right, great. Thank you, Rob. So we'll just start with the levy normal calculation here, factoring 2.5% increase, conservative estimate of new growth at 450. As you can see in the FY21 recap number, our new growth for FY21 was only 460. So when I say conservative or a reasonable estimate, I think we'll be able to get to a similar place as last year. We don't think we'll be seeing the $800,000 of new growth that we may have seen in prior years, but we're still considering 450 to be a reasonable number. And then debt exclusion is what it is. It's based on debt payments for the remaining school loans, which you'll see fall off in just a couple of years. So that is the biggest bulk of our revenue is our tax levy. Moving on, our next two large items that make up our revenue source, state aid, local receipts. State aid, the 3.4 million that we're putting in the forecast comes directly from the governor's budget. Governor came out late January with his proposed budget, and that is a number that we're using for now. We know that this is going to go through a number of passes through legislation before it's finalized, but for now we're sticking with that number. You'll see it's a small decrease from where we were in FY21, but in a few minutes we'll go down towards the state and county charges, which is essentially an offset to state aid, which also decreased about 50,000. So the net, there is no net gain or loss essentially on state aid from year to year, essentially keeping us flat at this point. Local receipts, 3.4 million is what we're putting in for our estimate here. We essentially kept all of our local receipts flat from FY21. We made some reductions in FY21 for economic uncertainty. We're continuing to be conservative. We have made a small increase, about 100,000 in our motor vehicle excise, only because we saw a better than expected commitment for our big FY21 initial commitment in February. So we've increased that 100. You notice that it's about $100,000 decrease, and really that relates to betterment revenue. So sewer projects that were funded by betterment revenue, this is essentially the last year that we'll be collecting that revenue. And you'll see a corresponding decrease in our non-excluded debt down below. So although we're showing it's a decrease from last year, we really kept our conservative budget and actually increased our local receipts by about $100,000 for the motor vehicle excise estimate. One area to note in the next section, the other financing sources, one-time receipts. We continue to use free cash to fund OPEB, our initial contribution to OPEB. We continued using our pension stabilization fund to help kind of smooth out the budget from 21 to 22. You see that it went from 200 down to 150. But we also had to propose using free cash for pension as well. So we'll get to this in a few minutes, but the quick overview is our pension assessment went up 22% from last year. Conservatively, we budget 10% increase annually based on Norfolk County Retirement recommendation. Their funding schedule usually states 7 to 8%. So the 10% is conservative. We usually come in closer to 7 or 8. New valuation year, some changes in staff, and we got a 22% increase. We've taken a hard look at some of that data too. So we may be going back to Norfolk County just to see if we can get an adjustment. I'm not counting on it. We found that there were some, just based on the timing of data, some inconsistencies that we're hoping to resolve. But we may not see credit for this year, but going forward, have a better handle on how they're calculating our numbers. But that's really, normally we wouldn't want to see free cash being used. But with a 22% increase, that was almost $300,000 or $400,000 more than we expected in a given year increase. So to help keep departments harmless, so to speak, and not have to consider layoffs or tightening, we use pension or the free cash pension stabilization fund to continue keeping our budgets in line and our departmental budgets whole, essentially. Any questions before I go down to the other amounts to be raised, shared expenses?
Anybody?
Hey, Don, I thought that one of those OPEB or the pension fund actually was a $500,000 change, and that this only reflected a part of us trying to account for it vis-a-vis free cash, and that we were going to have to, I think maybe it was you, Chris, at the select board said that we needed to then consider making up the remainder at a later town meeting. Am I misremembering that?
No, so what we tried to do is smooth it over 2 years, the impact. So you'll see in fiscal '23, in the forecast, we're also proposing 140,000 in that year of free cash. So when you go 2 years in a row, I mean, that would be a 33% increase in 2 years. If next year went back to the normal estimate of 10%, right? In 2 years, it's a 30% increase. So what we tried to do was smooth it over the 2 fiscal years, that increase from 10% to 22, and then the other 10% into 23.
Was the 22% an unexpectedly high amount, given the 7, 8, or even 10% trajectory? Was it because a lot of people retired as a result of COVID?
No, I really think a big part of it was when you look at their valuation, they had, I think it was a $95 million reduction in their, or increase in their net pension liability. So that allocated, and what they do is they do it based on payroll. So they take our records from what we give them for our withholdings, and at a certain point in time, they allocate it. They take everybody that's in the system, so town of Cohasset, town of Holbrook, whatever towns are in there, and they allocate the annual assessment based on those payroll percentages. So it really doesn't have anything to do specifically with people retiring from Cohasset. It's a combination of the updated valuation, which is a basis of Norfolk County's next 2 years of assessments to cities and towns. So I hope I answered your question, Gene.
To pick it as you're contemplating, is that part of it is related to the, I mean, there's an increase that's related to the fact that there are more pensionable employees the town had, though we dispute how many of them there are. On double counts, like people who serve in the same position that were employed during the period, but we didn't employ them both at the same time. They counted both. So we've identified 8 of those people, and we're expecting them to credit us, and they've to this point refused. We also found an employee who never worked for us at all, which actually triggered our deep concerns about how they were counting people. And they gave us a credit for that. So I'll give them, they gave us a credit for an employee who never appeared on payroll at all, which should be a 101. And the other thing that Don points out is their valuation. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know how on the planet any system would have declined. And again, this is through end of 19, not through the end of 20, their valuation. Everything's kind of a lag with the pension system. That said, the actuarial numbers, and again, they don't share the underlying, actuarial thinking. They just share the reports. And by the way, they're all available if you want to see them. We can share them. I don't know if they're on the Norfolk County site, but we can. Yeah, so you can. And Don and I met with them several years ago, and found them friendly, though a little opaque. And I remain even more concerned about how they do this. With healthcare, we've kind of zeroed in. We know what's coming. We see regular reporting. So we have an idea of where we're going to fall. With the pension, it's like every 2 years they pull a number out and say, "Here it is." Like 2 years ago, our number was less than we thought, and it's like, well, that's a great surprise. Except it was a nice thing. Except if it's echoed 2 years later by a catch up because they gave us the wrong number 2 years before, it's not good. So, unfortunately, we have to budget this and we have to pay. It's not like we have a choice of not to pay it. I'm hoping we get credit. So by the time we get to the actual approval process, we'll have a different number. We're going to still talk about what's going on with their valuations, because I don't think they're doing it in a governmental friendly way. I don't expect them to give us month by month averages, but these numbers, it's too big a swing. The numbers are getting too big. A $600,000 swing is not something that we can just absorb, which is the reason we did what we did.
Okay, well, yeah, no, that's helpful. I was just trying to understand the swings, including for forecasting purposes.
Yeah, they've given us they've basically told us, as Don said, project 10% for the next 15 years, which is, by the way, the number gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? The pensions funded 60% something, somewhere in the 60s, low 60s. And, you know, I don't know, I mean, we know what our pension reserve returns have been. I should say our OPEB returns have been, and they're invested the same way pensions are for the most part, because they can be a little more aggressive. And I got to tell you, I'm not particularly impressed with how Norfolk County's handling this, just because. And I realize that things have been a little volatile, but even this last year, right, we had this big crash, so we came back. So by the time the year ended last year in 2020, it was a home run. Now, if you took a snapshot in March, you were like, "Oh my God, the world's coming to an end." So, but we you know, Norfolk County has some more questions to answer. And by the way, we've tried to get them to come to meetings in town. They won't leave the office after 5. They don't believe that they need to visit boards. Now, maybe. I mean, we've asked that. They're like, no, we don't do that. So, world of Zoom, you know, they'll come if anyone had questions. But
Maybe not after the back and forth I've had. We'll see. I'd love to have them come, but you know, we had a lot of follow-up questions. I probably went back and forth with the guy 3 times, and he just kind of straight up said, you know, this is the last time I can really talk about this. So it wasn't really, yeah. It's been interesting conversations in relationship with Norfolk County, for sure.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
People who work at the pension board, are they, any of them elected officials?
well, the treasurer is Helen.
Thought so, right.
Yeah, he's like the. I mean, it's a board, but he's in charge of the Norfolk County pension system. I don't remember his name. He was just elected again.
I thought all board members were elected. I'd have to double check that though.
Well, he's elected countywide. I do believe that there are trustees that are elected from pools. I believe the retirees vote on somebody, and I don't. It's again, it's a rather opaque process for the people. But they're not the only elected official in the traditional sense of the word is the treasurer of Norfolk County, who's elected by the citizens of Norfolk County.
Right. So the only variables then, in terms of the up and down, the major variable is how the investments are doing. That's one. What are the other variables? How many people are going to be on pensions, obviously.
Right. I mean, longevity is one. I mean, for our own OPEB, you know, the actuaries determined that everyone's going to live longer.
Yes.
So, you know, and every year you live, you're pulling out of the system. So that hurt us on OPEB a couple of years ago, rather dramatically. It's a fair thing. People are living longer, right? I mean, you want to be accurate.
Right. Yeah, the actuarians figure that out.
Yeah. So that's, I would say that longevity is probably one of the other biggest ones. And you know, and the salaries that are covered are too. The difference with this is that only the first, and I forget those, the first 20,000 is adjustable, or the first 15 or 18?
The first 18,000.
So the first 18,000 is inflation adjustable, but the rest of the pension is locked forever. So if you have a $50,000 pension, 32,000 is going to be 32,000 until the day you die. The first 18 could go up with an inflation adjuster, which is in New York, 100% of your pension is adjustable after 5 years. They don't for 5 years. So every state's different in how it treats this. So
That's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Right. And I believe just to that point, and this is how, you know, how significant some of these changes can be to the unfunded liability. They did, I believe it was 15,000 was the COLA cap, increasing it system-wide to 18 resulted in an increase in unfunded liability by almost 6.3 million, just for that slight change. So again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. I'd be happy to share. Again, it's on Norfolk County's website. Be happy to send it out to you guys to take a look at some of the stuff that's included in the valuation and the changes in some of these numbers. I'm sure it'd be eye-opening. All right. So any other questions before we kind of move on to the next half of this schedule?
No.
All right. So other amounts to be raised. The majority of this you can see is state and county assessments. As I mentioned earlier, this is essentially the offset to what we get for state aid. So they give us $3.4 million for state aid, And then they take back about 580 for various state programming. Included in that would be the MBTA assessment, our assessment for Norfolk County, and a number of other small items in there. The next section, the transfer to other funds, is where we transfer and appropriate money to our capital stabilization fund and OPEB. So earlier we were talking about free cash for OPEB. You see the funding source up top, and now down here is where we're the expense, so the transfer comes. And the transfer to capital, we kept level year to year. In the past, and what will happen in the future, is the way this was supposed to work is that we had a level amount of capital, whether it was payments on non-excluded debt plus a transfer to capital stabilization. So if our debt service decreased by 100,000, this transfer would increase by 100,000. But as I noted earlier with the local receipts and betterments, almost all of the decrease in debt service going from 21 to 22 was related to betterments, which really should not be in the calculation of overall town capital in any roll-off going to the capital stabilization fund. So that's why I just wanted to make that point, why you'll see that there was no change from 21 to 22 in our transfer to capital stabilization fund. The next section, facilities department. This has been in the forecast, presented this way for, I believe, the last 2 or 3 years. For discussion purposes of potentially going to a consolidated custodian and facility staff that would cover all town buildings, schools, and again, this was more for a conversation piece, which is why we only put the staff expenses in here. Something that would kind of pop out, something to talk about. These budgets still live within the respective departments. So the custodian staff of 584,000 is still a school department budget. So even though it says 584,000 here, it's part of their overall town school budget, sorry. So they may only have 500,000 of custodial staff right now, but again, this is more for discussion purposes, and this is really just a small part of the overall school budget. Any questions before I get into these shared budgets? Seeing none.
Yeah, I think we're.
All right. Most of these are pretty straightforward and not significant changes till we get a little bit further down the line. HR, school support officer, those two are consistent essentially with prior years. Some small increases for contractual obligations and some more programming for the HR department. The reserve fund, it continued to gradually increase. I believe that's a 2.5% increase over last year. When we're out of these uncertain economic times, we will definitely circle back to this reserve fund and try to get to a point where our financial policies talk about the 1% of the budget. I know we've had this conversation in prior meetings, probably months ago. We're not at the 1% of the total budget, but we're continuing to increase this year over year in the reserve fund.
Just a clarification, Don. The reserve fund is what the advisory deals with.
Yes,
I
exactly.
just wanted the new people to recognize that.
Thank you. That's a great point.
Don?
Yeah.
Why does the South Shore VOTEC reside in the shared budget rather than the school department budget?
That's a great question. This is the schedule is something I inherited and have continued to use and modify as the years have gone by. I don't have a great answer on that, Rob.
That's okay. It was just, you know. It
I don't
just
either.
jumped out.
That's the way it's been done. That's the way it was done when I got here, and so that's the way it still gets done. So
I hate saying that it's the way it's been done, but unfortunately, when you get into the budgets, it's tough to make a move, even at the 140,000 or so, to move that from above the line to, you know, eating up some department's budget, even by 140,000. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hill to die on this year, but it just seems to be, it jumps off the page. I mean, school support officer does a little bit also, but the VOC bill certainly does, but not for this year, I don't think.
right, and that school support officer, it really is only a school employee. They are, you know, they're an officer, warrant officer, but they don't do any normal police duties other than work at the school, I believe.
well, that's not entirely true. Actually, they actually during the school year they do school stuff, but in the outside of the school year, like in the summers, they work at rec, and then they are able to do other work. So their primary job is school resource officer, to be clear, but that's not the only thing they do. And this was we agreed to put it here because it is kind of it's not normally something that the schools pay for, right? It's normally something a town assigns. So and so when we started this program 6 years ago, we decided to fund it up this way.
So Mary, then Jean Estino.
So that position was originally funded with a grant, correct? And then it got rolled into the budget, how many years ago? 2, 3?
No, probably 4 or 5. We
Five.
got a grant for I think 2 years,
Okay,
and then it's become a budget item ever since.
okay.
The danger of grants, I think. But
Yeah.
Jean Estino, go ahead.
Yeah, and that officer, in the event of an emergency, becomes a police officer for the town and gets pulled from the school building. If we had to do a lockdown at town hall, for example, he might be called to participate in those types of things. So it's not, I mean, it's mostly 100% for the schools, but then again, it's not.
Sorry, I misspoke. My point was majority of school.
Yeah, and I think that isn't the Voc Tech, I'm trying to recall, it's been a couple of years since I've had to look at that, but isn't the Voc Tech cost the per pupil, is it per pupil out of, yeah, it's the pupils that leave our district and go to school at Social Voc Tech. So for people who don't understand where that money, what that figure represents, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Don, I'm sorry, I sort of jumped in the middle of your presentation. Does anybody else have any questions at this point, or should we let Don get on with it? Hearing none. Don?
All right. Chief Information Office, that is Ron in the IT. This is the what is essentially known as essential infrastructure, mostly infrastructure costs, and Ron and the Deputy CIO salary lives in here. We'll be getting into that in more detail. I'll leave that for Ron when his presentation comes. Risk management. The majority of this budget is our property casualty insurance. And I believe the increase from 21 to 22 is just a little under 10%, which is better than expected. When we first had our meetings with Maya, they were having us estimate anywhere from 10 to 15%. So we actually got some good news on that. Social VOTEC we already chatted about. This interface, the Washington James, I always confuse this. I want to say Washington Jefferson. I believe it's Washington James College. This is another item that used to be funded by a grant, and last year I think was the first year that we had to actually start paying for it. And I forget how it really came. I believe it came through the school when it was a grant, and then we just kind of put it in the shared, because really it's a town-wide system that you can call in. And I know Helene has a better explanation of what this interface is than I probably could tell you. The next two sections are debt.
I got a question for you on that.
Fran, go ahead.
Who benefits from that WJC interface?
You want me to answer that?
Sure.
Okay, it's William James College, by the way.
What did I say, Washington?
Oh,
James?
right. And it can benefit the whole town. It's a referral for mental health services. And they vet different people in different situations. And if you need somebody for certain mental health issues, that's what it's used. A lot of towns have bought into it because there's no way that the counseling departments in the schools can handle all the different things that come their way. So it is a referral service. It's interesting that it went up, to 16,000, but anyway, that's what it does. And a lot of other towns really find it helpful. My office gets referrals from them. Just during COVID, we couldn't handle most of them, 90% of them, but it is utilized.
Who does the referring? The school department?
The Williams, the number is out there. I guess the school department can utilize it, but it's also, I believe, on the Rotary book, the local Cohasset Rotary book, I'm pretty sure. And so citizens can use it. It's not just for the schools. You could check. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I'll echo that, Helene. So the Safe Harbor Coalition, Cohasset Safe Harbor,
Oh, okay.
promoting this very heavily as well, Fran.
Right.
Or it's for anyone in town, families, it started in the schools because of a grant, or for, kids and their families. But it's much broader than that. And Safe Harbor has kind of adopted it and been really pushing it out to the residents as a resource. And their job is, as Celine said, to
Right.
I
And the
just
other-
want to be sure it wasn't a mysterious thing that
No,
we're
no,
paying
no.
for that nobody knows about.
No. It's very active. It's actually very actively used.
And the
Okay.
other good thing about it is because our basic social worker that works for the town is contracted to work with seniors only. So at least we have the interface to help people who need mental health services for the town. We don't have anybody for the non-seniors in this town who don't go to schools in this town. Does that
I
make
don't
sense?
see it under the emergency numbers here in the Rotary book.
No, it's under Safe Harbor.
Okay.
But I think that, Chris, that should, since it's coming from the town now, there should be a special notice in the numbers in the Rotary book for this interface. Because I really think there's not enough explanation to the town people that they could access it.
We actually, Safe Harbor just did I think I did it a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. There was a big social media push to explain what it was, and
Right, but it should be in our phone book. And it
I
should
can reshare that. Yeah, I can make sure that we can make sure.
This is 16,000 out of 50 million of our dollars. So I think that's a good conversation to have and to put in the hands of people who are expert. I think that it's also, a lesson in being careful and I'm not saying don't, but being careful in what we take grants for, and make sure that when they roll on afterward, that there's a conscious decision made to undertake that expense. But that's, again, we're in a rounding error at this point. So unless anybody has anything further, Don, if you want to continue.
Sure, thank you. Next two sections are non-excluded, our excluded debt service for next year, based on predetermined debt payment schedules. Norfolk County pension, already talked about 22% increase over last year. On good news, we had a decrease of about 7% in our workers' comp. So I'll take a win when I can get a win. And then health insurance is, I'm sorry.
That's workers' compensation insurance premium.
Yes,
Or do we self-insure any portion of comp?
that is a premium.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then health insurance. You'll see that it went down from last year. This is basically, we historically budget about 7% a year. Usually our pool range is 0 to 7%. To be conservative, we've been doing 7. Our base increase was only 4.5%. And then we also got the good news that will be receiving a full month premium holiday from Maya, which is significant. And we were able to kind of factor in some of that savings into this coming year's budget to be able to reduce that budget down to the 5.4 that is there now. You will see that I've budgeted the full amount, excluding that premium plus another 7% in 23, just to point out why you'll see a significant, not a significant, but a larger increase compared to the small decrease that we had going into 22. And then life insurance and Medicare tax both, I believe, are just our normal 2.5% estimated increase year over
One
year.
more question, Don.
Yeah.
Does the health insurance cover the school department as well?
Covers the entire town. Yep. All
That's
town
okay,
employees.
thank you.
And
It covers
retirees.
It covers actives and retirees.
Thank you.
And so when you follow the schedule down, you compare our available revenue, which is our total revenue and other financing sources, less all of the shared costs, we get 34.1 million, which is just under 1.2 million increase over last year at 3.42%. And that new revenue is essentially shared between the town and the school. The school receives 61% of that new revenue, and the town receives 39%.
Where does that split number come from, Don? I know I've asked this question before and I apologize.
That actually came before my time, determined there was a long-range planning group that had met and kind of gone over this forecast years ago. I have a really good feeling that it came based on the total payroll and the percentage of payroll between town and school. As I've gone back just the last few years and compared what the town's payroll versus the school payroll is, it's right in that range of 61% school and 39% town. So
Does that split capture the rough split within the shared expense? If you're comparing school department payroll and town payroll, and then you've got this pool of shared expense payroll that, maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 70-30, I don't know.
when you say the shared expense payroll, are you talking about health insurance?
No, I withdraw the question, Your Honor. It was too cute by half. That's a conversation we can have some other time.
Okay.
This number was I think settled during the budget challenge after the Great Recession. So when I got her, it had become settled policy, and we haven't really. There's been talk about it. We haven't really looked at jumping back in. A number of communities have something like this. We're not the only one by far, and it seems to have worked so far. So.
Right, and Rob, a number of communities, the share for the school is significantly larger.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, just real quickly, both Jean and I were on the Zoom last night at different periods with the school department. They did vote their budget. There is an $11,000 discrepancy between the budget they voted on to approve and what appears in the sheet, Don, but that's pennies at this point. So just
Thank
as
you
a
for telling me.
heads
I'll have
up.
to talk to Susan. And I'll have to shave $11,000 off.
Yeah, 11,470. Don't know why that is, but there you go.
Okay.
Very good. Any further questions? Don't see any. Don, is there more to say, or are we?
No, that really covers the bulk. I mean, that covers a forecast, how it went together, and then some of the highlights of each of the major areas. And going forward, we'll be getting into the major departments as you request them coming to your meeting. So we'll get more into the line item and the detail of the departments themselves.
We'll talk about some of that scheduling this evening before we're done. But we had scheduled Chief Sylvia for 7:45, and I'm delighted to say it's 7:44. I see his name and John Dockeray on deck. So Chris, if
They have been promoted to panelists, and they're both able. Let me. Oh, there we go. There he is.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Wow.
So I'll do the presentation. I invited John to come along as to answer any questions that he might be able to answer for us. And that I won't see the end of this fiscal year budget. So just so that everybody's aware of that, that's one of the reasons that John is part of this this thing. Not that I'm planning on exiting stage right here tomorrow, but by state law, at the age of 65, you have to retire as a firefighter. So I know I only look like I'm 22, but I will reach that number next year. So that being said, I think that Dawn has distributed a bunch of the information to you. I also, I look at the fire department budget very quickly. It's three pieces. The first piece is obviously salaries, and everything from my salary down through the 23 or 24 members of the what we would refer to as the operations staff. That would be part one, and we can talk about that in a minute. Part two is overtime, and I will back up to the salaries thing. That salaries are driven by contractual obligations, so that's what you see there is what contracts require. And I try to make it as transparent as possible. You can look at them from year to year. There's a couple of pieces that get involved with that, including the SAFER grant, which we can talk about briefly. And then we move on to as I said, the overtime. Overtime is basically based on historical expenditures over years. So we break it out into line items, whether it be training, callback, sick leave coverage, whatever it might be. Again, in an effort to try and make it as transparent as possible, we break it out into a bunch of categories, and then we try to show historically what that's all about. And then the last piece is the expenses. And expenses, again, everything is broken into line items, and we try to document pretty much hard numbers, what we spend on things. There are certain items that we have a difficult time trying to control, such as equipment repairs and things like that. But for the most part, you'll see that the numbers don't change a lot from year to year. The one item at the very bottom is what we refer to at the department as capital expenditures. And those are one-time costs for the most part that don't rise to the threshold of a capital budget item. So they're less than $10,000. I'd use an example of a thermal imaging detector that now used to cost 10 or 12 or 14,000. Now they cost 8,000. So we pay for them out of the budget as needed. So those are the three pieces of the budget. And I don't know how in depth you want me to get. Meg, I don't know if you shared those three or four items that I shared with you. Has anybody else seen those yet?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So, Chris, I don't know if you want to try and let me try to drive this for a minute, or how you want to do this. Dawn, your calls. I don't know what you guys have planned.
Well, no, I've just made you co-host, Chief, so you can share whatever documents that Rob will let you share.
Yeah. So we're going to see if we can get the old dog to learn another new trick. Okay. So let's see if I can find some of these items. So the first one, this is the salary sheet that I talked about. And when I talk about everybody, it's everybody from my line item through Chief Dockeray's to the 24 members of the department. As you can see, we're at 23 at the present time. The 24th has been because of COVID, and we are a state civil service department. We have not been able to fill that position. The good news is that that position will be filled this spring because we're going to go to that. Civil Service is finally going to produce a list for us, and we'll be able to start looking at that. So the second page of this is kind of this is the nuts and bolts of where we are with the salaries. As you can see, department head, assistant chief, operations staff, stipends. And stipends for the operations staff include anything. What we did is we lumped them a few years ago, we lumped them into one package. And if I were to slide back the other way, you'll see that a stipend is $3,000. It includes their clothing allowance. It includes some extra pay that they've negotiated into their contract over the years. I guess maybe I'll leave it like this because you can see it. The next order of the business is there's a couple of premium stipends, and that one is the department has a mechanic that is one of the shift commanders who actually does all the in-house general maintenance of the equipment. Anything that we don't have to send out. That would include changing of light bulbs, changing of oil, you know, doing the basic general maintenance to the equipment. The other one, as you can see, is a $1,200 stipend. That goes to the EMS coordinator. That's extra pay that's been negotiated in for him as he manages the EMS side of the house, which you can imagine with 24 paramedics, there's quite a to managing that entire piece. We move on from that to longevity pay. Again, longevity pay is a contractual obligation, depending upon how long you've been with us. The biggest one is $1,150 for anybody that's been here for 20 plus years or 25 plus years. And then it scales down to $350 for someone that's been here for 5 years, with us for 5 years. Education pay and longevity, I said longevity pay, education pay, contractual obligation. Again, we pay anywhere from, you see $3,900, that is for somebody that has an associate's degree. The next bump up is $6,100 for somebody that has a bachelor's degree. And then at the bottom, you're going to see that all of a sudden we're hiring very smart people. And we actually have 2 of the younger paramedics that have master's degrees in public administration with a concentration in emergency management. Somewhere down the road, that's going to pay dividends to the town. These are a couple of really bright guys, and they're working hard at it. So that's kind of the breakout of the salaries. And as Dawn had informed me this afternoon, the salaries number actually isn't 2248,910. It's 2196,910. It's down 52,000 from that number, and that's driven by, as I mentioned to you, the SAFER grant. Now, SAFER grant, for anybody that's not aware of this, this is a grant that we applied through from FEMA. It's a 3-year grant. On years 1 and 2, they pick up 75% of the salaries of the people that we hired. So we hired two firefighter paramedics 2 years ago, and 75% of their salary was paid for the first 2 years. Since we have started this, I just put in for the 8th quarter reimbursement. We've been reimbursed by the federal government to the tune of $231,129. So that's what, you know, the salary and benefits, because they pay for both, has been picked up on that, which is, that's good news. The bad news is that in year 3, it drops down to 35%. So that includes, I think that really speaks to the increase in the salaries from last year to this year, is the difference in what we'll get back from the federal government, but I'll let Don speak to that if he wants to. So that's kind of the salaries. I can answer any question on salaries, or I can move on to overtime, whatever you want to, however you want to handle it.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Yeah, I think, just if you could highlight any outliers, anything that's not in the salary. I think we're through that. It is all generated by collective bargaining. Where are you in your contract cycle, Chief?
So the firefighters have just, their contract will end on June 30th. They have just started negotiations with the town, and it's ongoing. So this contract or this salaries request does not reflect anything but a 2% increase for me and a 2% increase for Assistant Chief Dockery. No other increases are in here other than steps that anybody that had a step raise for this year from last year because of they've reached a plateau of 5 years or 10 years or whatever it might be. Those would be the only increases, and they're small at best. They're a few $1,000s, so nothing really there.
If there is a new successor agreement, let's be optimistic and say it gets signed, June 29th. Will that, if that contains, pay raises, which it very likely will, how does that get accounted for in the budget for the following fiscal year? Or does it, or am I imagining a problem that doesn't exist?
That's a Dawn question.
I kind of figured.
So we'll be proposing a one-time cost article, a contract settlement article, essentially, to account for things like this. So,
Okay.
So it'll be accounted for, an estimate of something. I don't know what the percent will be. We'll have to talk with
So we
Chris
should be-
and just determine some of the other contracts out there. But we'll be doing a one-time cost article.
We should be anticipating a warrant article looking for allocations to the differences in any number of collective bargaining agreements that are going to be open.
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting set of questions. Mary, then Lee.
So would that be an article that would come this May or come at special town meeting in November?
It'll come in May.
Okay,
We'll be proactive about it.
okay.
Chief, in the past, if they get a 2%, just say, if that only applies to salaries, or is that applied across the board for everything? But I know it's negotiated, but I mean, how has it been in the past?
No, it just, if they get a 2% increase, it just goes to salaries. It does not, everything across the board does not increase by 2%.
Okay. Unless it's negotiated.
True.
Anything else? Hey, Chief, you're going to move on to overtime, which is, always something we want to hear about. So let us know.
Let's see if I can find that one. That's the one that I'm trying to pull up now. Okay. Of course, I don't have it on my screen for a second, so give me 1 sec to just drag this up. I thought I had these all in place, folks.
Are you looking for the,
Okay, there we go. So if I can do this, okay, can everybody see that screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is when I say this is broken down. It is broken down by, as you can see, every one of these categories. So it's category, estimated number of hours based on the historical use, then the average overtime rates, and then we come up with an expenditure. So everything here from, administrative leave is anything that we have to bring somebody back in for administrative purposes, whether it be or we have to put somebody out on administrative leave for some reason. So that's what that averages out to. And as you can see, it's about 300 hours a week. It's not 364. It's not a big item. Bereavement leave, again, somebody having to be out for that reason. And that's a historical number. Callback is an interesting character because we've always historically and I'll go back to when I first started, when the vast majority of the people that worked for the Cohasset Fire Department either lived in Cohasset or a surrounding community, we used the idea of it was cheaper to bring people back on overtime to fight fires and do other things than it was to pay for salaries and benefits. So that has historically remained the same thing, that we try to do that. And when the ambulance leaves town, as an example, we try to bring 2 people back to try and maintain a certain level of service. The problem has become that, just as a heads up for everybody, that the vast majority of the firefighters just, it's a simple fact, they can't afford to live in the general area. So they've moved farther and farther away. It becomes more difficult to operate with this callback system that we've always used. But those number of hours, again, it's kind of, this is a kind of a bar that moves up and down, but this is, again, based on past history on what we've done. The rest of these items, you see storm coverage. We don't plan for storms. We react to them as we do. And if we have to go in and we have to bring people in extra coverage for storms, we work it out of someplace else in the budget. Somewhere else in this overtime budget is how it gets, you steal from one to pay the other, and it works out pretty well. Same thing, fire prevention. Fire prevention is now handled by the assistant chief of department, so we don't have to spend any overtime money on that. We were bringing someone in a couple of shifts a week to do that, so that was a savings in that regard, on top of the fact of the other things that the assistant chief does. The rest of them that you see as we go down through this, everything is based on what historically we've seen. The one big increase we've had is where you see the military coverage. We have one member of the department who is in the Army National Guard, and Governor Baker has decided for most of this year, which has kind of driven this and part of last year, that he's more valuable to them than he is to us. So we have to cover his shift when he's not in, and that's what you see, that military coverage. That's what that is. I think right now he's working at a vaccination site someplace. So the rest of it, personal day, as you see, the one thing I will point out here is the sick leave coverage. And it says 72 hours per employee. Well, all of our employees work 24-hour shifts. So if somebody's sick for a day, it's a 24-hour shift that we have to cover. So that's where it says, 72 hours. Well, it's actually only 3 occurrences. So the average is 3 occurrences of sick leave per person per year. And we have something else in the budget that last year, there's an incentive to not using sick leave and a payment for it. And last year we had a record number of people that took us up on that incentive, which was a really good thing. It actually saves us a whole bunch of money. So that's a good thing. Then, we get down into the next piece of this overtime is for training. And you can see where we go with that. It's, it's broken out into, again, I try to keep this as transparent as possible. You can see exactly how we spend the training money that we spend for overtime. And I think if I pull that down, yeah, so there's the total number of the training budget. So it's 86,711. So you can see exactly how it's spent. We don't, well, let's put it this way. We pull off a couple of things like the live fire training. The city of Boston and the fire commissioner has been generous enough to allow us to use his facility one day a year or a couple of days a year. So we ship all of our guys up and we do a full day of live fire training. And not only does he let us use the facility, he provides the instructors to work with us at the same time. It's a really great opportunity for the guys. And I owe the old commissioner a huge debt of gratitude, and hopefully the new commissioner will continue to work with us in the same way, in the same manner.
Bob,
Excuse me, Lee?
Is that in Quincy? That
Well,
facility?
it's right there at, yeah, it's right there on Moon Island, right at the end of Squantum. Yeah, and it's, to be honest, it works out really well because it's close. We used to go all the way to Barnstable to do the same thing. We went to the Barnstable Fire Academy. The Mass Fire Academy is actually trying to spin up a site at Bridgewater where the Bridgewater jail is. And that's probably going to come online in the next couple of years. So we'll have access to that too. If we don't have access to Boston. But Boston is, as Lee mentioned, it's right at the end of Wollaston Boulevard. Take the right at the lights at Dunkin' Donuts and go out to the end of Moon Island. And it's a great facility. It's brand new. So it's something that we used to have to pay for. So that's kind of the overtime piece. The breakdown on the hours, as I said, you saw them on the front page. Again, everything is detailed out exactly how we're doing it. And then the last piece, as I mentioned, was the training piece. And there's the breakdown of training and how we do it. You can see a lot of it is driven by that EMT paramedic recertification. Those are federal, state, and South Shore Hospital requirements that we have to meet to keep all of our guys as current as possible. So that's the overtime piece. Questions on that?
Chief, I got a question about the training for the firefighters. Do all hands get the live fire and fire pump and driving every year?
Yes, so there's everybody, all hands on deck, including the assistant chief. The one guy that doesn't participate in that at this point is usually me.
Yeah.
I'd like to, but usually they've got me off doing something else at that point. But everybody is involved with that. Yes, Fran.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I will mention that the fire pump training, we collectively in the regional fire departments, so Hingham, Hull, Norwell, Situate, Cohasset, we actually again went to FEMA and received a grant to buy a fire pump trainer. So we used to have to bring a company in and had to pay for this. They would come in, they would do the training, they would do everything else. Well, we have managed to get one of our own that we will be able to share amongst the 5 fire departments. So again, at a savings to all of us, and it was, I think we paid 1/5 of the 15% of the overall cost, because we did it as a regional grant. And FEMA, one thing we've all learned about FEMA is that when you do regional grants, you have a much better chance at making or getting money. So we constantly go after those things as a group. We're lucky enough to have 5 fire departments in the 5 communities and the 5 fire chiefs and training officers and everybody that work really well together. So it works out pretty well for that on that point.
So I think the third part was equipment, Chief?
Yeah, the last part would be expenses. And
Are there any, just by way of highlight before you go through it, is there anything in there that's unexpected or an anomaly, or is it all pretty much of a piece with prior years?
It's pretty much right along the same lines as prior years. Again, there's no increase because there's no salary increase this year. The overtime, with the salary increase, obviously overtime rates go up. So that number would increase a little bit. But if you look at it compared to last year, it's pretty much in line. And it's, again, we really work hard at trying to make sure that we can justify all of these expenses. And that's why I say to you that it's historic more than anything else, that it gets tweaked every year when we see that we didn't need something and we needed something else. So it's worked pretty well. And I've had obviously 14 years of tweaking this, so I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Okay. Any further questions about the fire department component of the budget?
We're gonna go over what you're gonna get?
As far as what, Lee?
No, the equipment. Are we gonna go over the equipment that you're trying to get, or what?
Oh, you mean the capital stuff? I can do that too, yes. That's no problem at all. But I just wanted, this is the expense line item budget. And again, as you saw with the others, everything is detailed out to exactly all of these categories. I think sometimes I drive Dawn a little crazy with all the stuff we do. But if I were to come down through this and, you know, the first big one you see there is vehicle maintenance. Well, you can see that we really track this across everything that we do. And we try to do a lot of our repairs in-house, but what we bump into is very simply that the equipment that, you know, it's not the old 4 on the floor manual transmissions. Now everything is computer generated and driven. So a lot of the stuff that we have to do for repairs, we send out to a facility. And I will mention real quick that our mechanic is actually certified. So we make sure that all the repairs are done by certified mechanics, but we send it out to usually for most of our equipment right now was made by Pierce, and the nearest Pierce dealership is in Walpole, right on Route 1 near Foxborough, near Gillette. And we send it up there to get that stuff done. The other stuff is the inspections and testings and everything else. You see that we try to maintain this stuff to try and make sure it's as safe as possible. So that's kind of that one. I'll roll down through this real fast. You can see some of these things have been zeroed out over the years because, you know, when we developed an IT department, all of the money that we had in our budget went there. Contracted services, just so you understand that, that's the big one at the top is ambulance service billing and collection fees. We have a private company that does that work for us and does the collections for us so that it's done properly. And we pay, I think we're paying 3.5% on collections for them to do that now. We negotiated that down when I first started. I believe it was up at about 7%. And over the years, we've negotiated it down by working them pretty hard, I should say. So, and just so you understand why there's 3 numbers across there, Dawn asked all of us to do an exercise in regards to what happens if the budget is too tight, and we need to start looking at cost savings. So as you can see, this across the top here, the first one is the FY22. That's the request. If I had to make a 5% reduction, you can see that there are certain things we can do. And if I had to make a 10% reduction in expenses only now, that's where we would go. So we went through the exercise. That's what's there. This is available to you guys if you want to see it. Hopefully we won't get to that point, but what I should do is I should pull up this one because this is actually a better way to look at it. At least I think so. So this is comparing fiscal 21 to 22. So you can see what we do with these budgets. And as you'll see, try to really hold the line. And if we can, we do. An example here is you see that there's a $910 decrease in the equipment maintenance. Well, that's because, again, Chief Dockeray went to the fire marshal and was able to get SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, fit testing equipment on a grant. So we will be doing all of that in-house. We will get some of our folks trained to do it, and we'll do that stuff in-house. And through a grant through the marshal's office, they paid for the equipment. So that's a good thing. Anything free is a good thing. But as I go down through these, if you have any questions, you can see the contracted services went up. And that's just so everybody's aware of this. The ambulance billing went down a little bit because, again, it reflects how much we're paying. We don't pad the budget, so how much we're paying, we tried to get it. But at the very bottom, you see that what it says, Lexipol policy manual annual fees. Well, we contracted to a company. It's a national company that is helping us build out our policies and our procedures and everything else, so that we are covered from a legal standpoint. I could tell you a long story about the founder of it, but he He was a former California Highway Patrol officer that became incredibly well-educated. He's a big-time lawyer. And after suing a whole bunch of people, he figured out that he could come back to us and tell us how not to get sued. So it's one of those things that this is an annual fee. We added it to the budget. We tried to trim a few other things in the budget so that the budget wouldn't go up. And as we go down through, you'll see that we did. I mentioned the EMS service. That's the equipment that we use and the companies that we contract out with to make sure that they maintain our equipment properly, especially the cardiac monitors. That's again, in an effort not to get into legal trouble, we make sure that this equipment is done by certified technicians so that it works the way it's supposed to, and there's a paper trail in case something goes wrong. At the very bottom is where we'll go, because you can see there's pieces in here for training and education. I mentioned the EMS recertification stuff. All of that is in here. Dues that are paid to certain professional organizations, mostly for me. I'll be honest about that. But then that's the bottom one there is the capital number. And as you can see, last year we spent 16.8 in capital items. And remember I said that these are one-time purchases. So there's no fee every single year. So we cut them out once we buy them. And if we need a second piece, and that's what you're seeing with those two at the very top, then we go back in and try again. So that's what we're trying to do. And when you see the battery powered equipment with obviously everybody sees it in even yard equipment and everything else that's going on now, that the quality of the batteries and the quality of the equipment is gotten to a point where, to have to drag 300 feet of electrical cord to the back of a house as opposed to grabbing something, running to the back and turning it on is obviously an improvement in operations as well as, as safety for all of us. And we have limited personnel. So you can see the bottom line, total request last year, 234,870, and this year, 236,260. I managed to get that Lexipol piece into our budget, the fire department budget, without it affecting the bottom line in a big way. So that was the goal. So that's the last piece of this. This is the FY22 expense budget.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. That's all, the component of the budget standpoint, really good news. Does anybody have any particular questions relating to the equipment portion, Lee?
Well, I'm just in the equipment, not so much this particular part, but equipment. I was reading over last year's purchases, and it's not the new ambulance. Would this be in line? The new ambulance, talking about equipment.
So the new ambulance, the ambulance was a capital item that was paid for in last year's capital budget, not this coming year's.
Right.
So yes, it's on order. I don't have to tell everybody that because of COVID, things have drastically changed in the world we live in, and that includes delivering cabs and chassis to ambulance builders. So we're still waiting on delivery, but that was a last year thing. This year, capital-wise, we had 3 items in there for capital budget. The first one is the replacement of a 2009 Ford Explorer. It's the vehicle that's driven by the assistant chief of the department right now. We pushed it off for a year, thinking that we would be okay. It's out right now getting a new transmission. So we kind of stepped in it a little bit. That we thought we had a plan for it. We pushed it off an extra year. It usually has a 12-year replacement cycle. We tried to push it off to year 13, and it didn't work out. So that's part of the replacement cycle on the administrative vehicles, which there are only 2 of them. One I drive and one the assistant chief drives, and those are replaced every 12 years. So we drive these things in essence into the ground, and then we replace them. So there's a $50,000 capital request for that. And the reason it seems that high is, again, none of the equipment that's on a vehicle that's 12 years old can really be transferred onto a new vehicle, number one. And number two, the fire department is going to be part of this hybrid experiment. Chief Quigley at the present time in the police station is driving a hybrid. We're going to be the next test case, the fire department, with the idea that over 12 years that a hybrid vehicle, the additional cost of the hybrid will certainly be covered by any type of savings that you'll get over 12 years. And again, you think about a fire department vehicle, a lot of times, especially when it's responding to any type of emergency, it does more idling than anything else. So with lights on and idling, a hybrid will burn a lot less fuel. So that's one. Two is some corrosion repairs to the 2010 Pierce engine. We've done it with a couple of the other vehicles in the fleet so far. And this one is starting to show that same problem with corrosion underneath. And we will send it out. We use a company in Whitman to do this work for us. And he's done it for a lot of the fire departments across the whole South Shore and Eastern Mass, everywhere. He lifts the body right off the frame, sandblasts everything, recoats, repaints, recoats, puts it all back together. And if you want to see an example of it, all you have to do is come down and look at the ladder truck, which we did a few years ago. And he did a spectacular job. I mean, legitimately, it is, we're trying to get 24 years out of a truck. So the idea at 10 years to fix the corrosion now and hope that it lasts another 14 is what we're aiming at. So that's request number two. And I will just give you a quick thought on that. When we bought the last truck 2 years ago, what we did with it, we went to what Pierce now refers to as the Northeast package. Everything underneath the truck is either stainless steel or galvanized steel. It's no longer painted mild steel. So the idea is that between the galvi and the stainless, there'll be certain things that we'll probably continue to have to worry about, such as brake cans, which are the air brakes, the metal cans that are underneath, those type of things. But hopefully we won't keep running into this corrosion issue. So we're hoping that with this 210 corrosion replacement or fix, that will be okay. And then the last item that we had for a capital request was replacement of some rescue struts. And what are rescue struts? Rescue struts are stabilization equipment that is used anytime a vehicle, mostly for vehicle accidents, but it can be for any type of a building collapse or anything else, but to stabilize the area so the people working in it are safe. So I use the example of a car that's rolled over or on its side or whatever the case may be. So we're replacing a set of 2007 struts with some newer style ones that are a lot simpler to use, can be deployed by a single person instead of multiple people, and are pretty much used by most of the other departments around us. And an idea of that if everybody's using the same type of equipment, it can be used if, none of us can afford to buy a whole lot of this stuff, but if we had to, we can pool it in a mutual aid response and make it work. So those are the capital items, Lee. I didn't have a spreadsheet on those. I'm sorry.
Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob, a couple things. You don't do any work.
We're past time. Go ahead. I mean,
I'm going to be quick, but I'm saying
quick is good.
on truck number 3, you don't touch that, right? You don't put any repairs at all to that truck, do you? The pumper.
The third one in the fleet? Oh,
Yeah,
it's fully
the oldest
operational.
one. The oldest
Yeah,
one.
Oh, no, it's fully operational. It is ready to go at a moment's notice. And anytime one of the other two goes out to be worked on or has to have service, like right now, if we send this out to have the corrosion done, it'll go right into service. So yes, it gets used and it's ready to go. It's not just sitting in the corner collecting dust.
The next question is, I noticed this is the last year's, but I wasn't here when you did this, or maybe I didn't see it. But ambulance, the 2008 ambulance, the ambulance we have now is not a 2008, is it?
No, we replace an ambulance every 6 years. So at 12 years, same type of thing. At 12 years, we replace the ambulance. We have two.
Yeah, I get it. So you're really comparing it with, back 6. You're comparing it with a 14, not an 08. That's your backup ambulance you're comparing it with, not the regular ambulance.
I don't understand the question.
Okay, you're replacing it with a 2021 ambulance to replace the 2008 ambulance. But that's your backup ambulance, correct?
We replaced an ambulance last year, yes.
You haven't replaced
So-
it yet. You haven't gotten it.
Well, we're waiting for it to be delivered and the 2008 will come offline. That's correct.
That's your backup ambulance.
And the one that we're presently using will become the backup.
Right, I understand. Okay, one other thing I've asked you before. Do you have a property book with all your equipment in it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And the price?
Well, we don't update the prices all the time, but yeah, we know what we own.
Okay, anybody else? Dean, Gilly?
Hi, Chief Sylvia. Thanks very much for the presentation. Just real quick question. Who's the collector that we hire in order to collect ambulance bills? Do you recall?
Yeah, it's a company, it's called Comstar, Comstar.
Okay.
And they do this, they're based out of, I believe it's Amesbury, but they do this for multiple departments in Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Very good. Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you, John. With John, I can just wave out my window. Thanks, this is kind of our first stop on working our way through the department budgets. I hope they all go, this well. I'm sure they will. We have a couple of other agenda items, but if you guys want to pack it in, please feel free.
Rob, I will say just finally that if there's any questions or anything else, you know how to find me. An email, a telephone call, whatever it takes. My liaison to the advisory committee can almost throw a football down to my house. So same way, I'll wave out the window to her right now. So if you need anything, just reach out and I'll get it for you as quick as I can.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have a couple of additional items for the agenda, one of which has to do with, I characterize as review of warrant, and then we have some minutes to approve. So, but in connection with review of warrant, I'd like to talk a little bit about scheduling some presentations. Chris, but first, I mean, where are we at with an embryonic draft preliminary warrant, even a list of the articles, expected articles?
My hand, a list of 30 articles.
Can you just lose 2 of those pages and we'll go from there?
There we go. So 10 of them are zoning, or relate to the zoning code. The vast majority of them, as Rob mentioned, are really definitional. They're not, like, one is changing the name of the Board of Health to the Board of Public Health. The reason zoning article is because the name of the Board of Health is referenced in the zoning code. So you have to go through the referral process. It's not controversial. It doesn't change anything substantively, but you still have to go through the process. There are a couple of that are pretty critical. One being changing the floodplain to conform with FEMA's new maps. This is not the ocean floodplain, it's the inland floodplain. And they've added a new twist. They're asking people not just to change the maps, but to update their bylaws. So we're working with council on how to do that. If we get it done this year, we might as well just get it done, right? And I don't think it's anything terribly controversial either. It's just something to deal with. There are a couple of the 10 zoning. So I would recommend, Rob, that you consider clumping those together in some form to have maybe a zoning palooza night.
I had a very useful conversation with the planner today, and we really did go through them. 5 of these articles, 4 of them are identical to articles we approved last year. Easy. One is the FEMA floodplain one, which we approved, but it's different because FEMA wants it worded differently. easy. Change the name of the Board of Health in the zoning articles, easy. That's 6. Of the remaining 4, one of them may or may not go forward, so we don't need to deal with that until the planning board does its thing, which it's likely to do in early March. And then the remaining 3, if I'm counting correctly, come to us from the Master Plan Implementation Committee, one of which is not a particularly big deal. I think it has to do with definitions also, but there are 2 of the 10 that are likely to require some real effort. So good news is that 80% of the zoning articles are easy. The other news is that, we're going to need to put them on the schedule and really pay some attention. The other non-department article is town hall, and that's going to require the question that's going to come before us is whether or not to support an article to provide $750,000 toward the work and obtaining bids for a project that'll come back. It's anticipated to come back before town meeting in a year. So that, in one sense, it's a limited article. In another sense, it forecasts the whole town hall project. So that's going to require some thought as well. I think the zoning articles clearly can't happen before April 1st because the planning board may be having hearings on them as late as the 31st of March. They've scheduled a hearing, the second day of which, if necessary, is the 31st. So Chris, I was going to suggest that we put the zoning stuff on for the presentation on those zoning articles on for, we have a meeting on April 8th. If we're just slotting things in, if anybody's any thoughts on this, please jump in, but it can't be before that. We don't have a lot of time after it. So zoning a palooza, and then we'll see if there's anything else that can or needs to go in there. And then there's the town hall question, and that's moving forward on a bunch of different fronts. We have a meeting scheduled for the 18th, and we have a meeting scheduled for the 25th. It should probably go on one of those nights for a presentation. Mary?
Yes, I had reached out to Phil Lear, who's the chair of that committee, and just told him that Fran and I would be the liaisons again. And he mentioned to me that somebody sent a communication, I'm not sure who, that the 25th worked for them. So maybe we should slot it in for that.
I don't know who's corresponding on behalf of our.
I have no idea, nor do I.
But I don't think that's irrational. I think we may be at risk of not having Meg with us, but we have to do something that night. So, so let's tentatively say town hall on the 25th.
Is that March?
Pardon me?
Is that March 25th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So April 8th for zoning, March 25th for town hall. We have, just rolling forward, we have a joint meeting next Tuesday with water and sewer, which Mary, I'll let you know. I may be okay for that, but I may also be
okay
in transit, so we'll figure it out.
Okay.
We have a meeting on the 16th, which is down for a joint meeting for citizens petitions. And then on the 18th, we're open. So I think, Chris, that would be, you tell me, but that seems to be a time to get as much work done as we can on things we could, police department, DPW. What do you think? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I would say, well, definitely DPW and police. Do you want IT to come in only because of the breadth of what they do?
I think part of it is, are they presenting a budget that moves the needle in any significant way? are they, are they looking for 10% more dollars in this year's budget? I mean, maybe somebody could come in and give us, I think IT is important. So, I mean, it's critically important. I mean, what are we doing now? So maybe if we could put them on but really the liaisons to the various committees can emphasize that, we really need to think about the things that require thought. And if, like the chief came in with, a lot of these items they're great. They're 0.5%, 1%. It's nice of him to walk us through all the detail. We probably didn't need it. But he's, it's always fun to hear from Chief Sylvia, so I enjoy it. But yeah, I think probably a brief presentation from IT. They really don't need to justify themselves to us. They just need to let us know that the budget contains sound, sound numbers. And if there's something like Don came in with, I think it really requires us to be knowledgeable about this, this change in the pension liability, which is really, really startling. And, and I'm glad we spent some time with it. So yeah, so police, DPW and IT, that would probably be a full meeting, yes?
I might ask that you add on to that maybe super routine zone articles like additional real estate exemptions, Chapter 91 liability, the revolving fund renewals, those kinds of things that are fairly pro forma.
Okay.
I'll give you a list of them. So.
Okay, yeah, just, send me a list. So that's the 18th. The 25th is down for, well, let's do this, Chris. If you could just list, in addition to what we just talked about, we've got on the 30th, we have a joint meeting with Capital Budget and CPC. On the 13th of April, we have a meeting with the school committee. What am I forgetting? Who needs to come by? Who's important?
You said something for April 8th. I don't know what it was planned on there, but
April 8th is the zoning articles.
zoning, thank you.
There's some other financial articles, which, like we might be able to get stabilization and all of that on the 18th as well. I mean, that's not pro forma, but that, there's a stabilization setting. There's a one-time costs. Those are the two. There might be some unpaid bills. In fact, I know for a fact there are some unpaid bills that we unfortunately found out there. And then there's a couple of the South Shore VOTEC is seeking approval of a bonding authorization. They're looking to bond $18 million, almost $19 million worth of repairs. The town's fractional share of it is not going to be very big, and we won't see that until 23. But they need all the towns to vote this. If you'd like to have Tom, oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name, the superintendent of VOTEC come in to present this, along with our representative, the town's representative, you might want to have that on an evening. I mean, again, it doesn't have short-term implications, but it does have long-term implications. I mean, it's not a crazy amount of money, but it's real.
Well, it's what we do.
Right. So booking him in advance is something that's got to, I got to get Tom and I got to get George.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's the sort of thing that we give half an hour, prior to the town hall conversation. We just say you get 20 minutes or 25 minutes and then let the other one go after. Do people have feelings about this? I just want to be efficient to cover everything. And let's put it this, it looks like we've got our meetings for the 9th, the 16th, 18th, and the 25th pretty much lined up. So why don't we leave it there and we'll just revisit this when we're having our own meeting on the 18th and do some more scheduling, or is there anything else that we should lock in now? Mary?
Yeah, I wonder if we just want to, I mean, I know we're having a joint meeting to hear presentations from water and sewer. I just think we're probably going to want to block off time to actually have a discussion about those items because they're pretty big.
Yeah, well, particularly Chris, they're coming in for rates. That's for that's a town meeting question.
Correct. That both water and sewer are seeking rate increases.
Yeah, we should probably listen to their presentation on the 9th and see how much we can get done there. I think what we do is when we meet on the 18th, we make some decisions about, we've got an entirely open meeting on the 1st that we could lay, we can maybe assess what's out there on the 18th and then fill up that agenda with things like, specific discussion about water and sewer. And, by that point, the articles themselves will have there'll be a little bit more meat on the bones, and, we can estimate how much conversation these things require. And some of them may, kind of self-correct and go away.
There are other small ones. There's changes to the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw, which was presented to the select board. And there's a potential article to tighten our rules about possession of alcohol by those under 21. That's being encouraged by Quonset Safe Harbor. So I know that Quonset Safe Harbor would like to make a presentation in support of that, explain what their reasoning is. And I have to think about the select board. They're meeting on the 13th and the 20th of April. That's kind of like their the 13th is that joint meeting, and then the 20th is their Votapalooza. Hopefully we're done with the warrant at that point, or pretty close, or as close to it as possible.
We have a placeholder meeting on the 15th of April that can catch things that, are developing, or, and there's no rules against not having a meeting if we don't need one, but I think it's a whole lot worse to be scrambling around looking for dates if we're not able to adequately consider what's in front of us. So
you just sketched this out pretty well for me, so I can line people up now pretty well for the 18th, clearly, and then you have zoning on the 8th. I'll get the VOTEC on the 25th, and that you might be able to put another thing or two on the 25th if they're comparatively small. So.
Yeah. Okay. Is Fran?
Yeah. Chris, is there any chance that job people could update this schedule that you put out in the mid-December? This is the fiscal year 22 budget and town meeting planning calendar.
Yep. You want to add your meetings to it?
Could you?
Yeah.
That'd be great if you could. Yeah. I need all the help I can get.
No, I've got a kind of a running calendar that, kind of list that I've been running with and populating. So if I'll look at what Chris circulates, and if I think it's useful, I'll send it around too.
Because actually that helps me schedule, because some things take a double dance at, everything that you see comes to the select board anyway. And they always want to see your comments before they vote. And then some things also have that some things bounce, like some CPC projects also go to capital and then come all the way back. So.
Okay.
Good.
I think that's a sound plan, and we can always make adjustments. Anything else on scheduling and the warrant? Cool. All right. The last thing on our agenda is we have, and Jean, I'll rely on you to make sure I get this right. We have 3 sets of minutes to vote. The first one of which are minutes from the February 4th meeting. So
Make a motion to approve the minutes from February 4th meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Mary, second.
I actually have a comment.
Okay, can I have a second first, and then we can discuss?
I'll second.
Second, and discussion. Ms.
Second and discuss.
McGoldrick, what say you?
Only just real quick, Jean, the title of the title line of the minutes is the wrong date. It's listed correctly on the minutes, but if you just retitle the minutes when you send them.
Okay, yep, I see what you mean, yep.
And the only other thing I wanted to ask about was on page 2, there's just a comment about something that happened after the meeting. And I think the meeting notes only can reflect what happened in the meeting. So under expenditures, 62.2%, that last line. Don Piat agreed to send a breakdown of such costs, comma, which he subsequently did by email to advisory committees on February 5. I think that should be stricken.
Okay, so the question that I have is, and this is sort of a nerd question, but all documents that the advisory board receives should be reflected in the minutes. And I guess my question is, if we receive it subsequent to a meeting, should it be in the following week or should it be in the week pertaining to the documents that were discussed? I'm agnostic, but I'm just raising the issue because that's why I added it.
My understanding is the only thing that needs to be referenced or included with the meeting notes are what happened at the actual meeting in open session. And Helene and Jean can jump in there.
Chris, you have any thoughts about that?
Well, no, Gene's point's well taken. I mean, if things were received, they need to be, they should be included somewhere. So I don't know if you just want to, you can just include it as received in the next, you know.
As a practical matter, it seems that if something is a follow-up document for something that happened in meeting A, that if they're attached to the minutes of meeting B, somebody who's actually trying to use the minutes for the purpose for which they exist, which is to figure out what's the record on this. I mean, I take your point, Mary. I think you're right as a matter of law, but I think maybe, you know, I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with attaching a document. Or am I just being whimsical about our obligations under the open meeting law?
You'd be more thorough, I believe, than the law. I mean, I wouldn't suggest you take, like, if we stop the recording, you don't take transcripts after the meeting ends. That said, if it's the document during the meeting, you all saw it during the meeting, but you didn't get a copy of it till afterwards. So I think putting it in there, maybe.
If that's the case, then absolutely, because then it's what we're doing is we're appending a document that was distributed after the meeting, but was used at the meeting. So I would include it with the meeting on which it was during which it was on the screen. Everybody okay with that?
Perfect.
Did you decide?
Is that the right context, Gene? Was it used or was it just referenced for informational purposes? Because I don't remember for sure. That's one of the worlds. So we're this new world here, right? Where
that was actually it was a comment that Gina Stino had. And I'm sorry, this is a silly conversation.
It was subsequent.
Almost time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything. He sent additional documentation after the meeting. It wasn't something we viewed during the
He
meeting.
didn't have it at the time.
Yeah.
He did not have it at the time.
Yeah, then I suspect it probably shouldn't be referenced. You know, and then if it's relevant afterward, would we include it in the subsequent minutes, or else you know?
Yeah, I agree with that,
It's a
Rob.
freestanding public record, but it's not part of the meeting. Go ahead, Colleen.
I agree with Rob. I think if people are interested in it, they could get it. And if it's important, it could be in Outlook, you know, how you record things. Chris? You know how you record things in Outlooks? You can record documents and stuff in Outlook.
well, if it's been distributed, it's a public record, right? So it's out there somewhere. So
Yeah, it's inherently a public record. It's just
Exactly.
not part of the minutes of the meeting.
Exactly.
Just an
So
additional-
I don't think it should be in either. If it wasn't mentioned in the meeting, then it shouldn't. I mean, it wasn't presented in the meeting, so it shouldn't be in that minutes, and it shouldn't be in the next one because we're not even talking about it in the next one. But
Yeah,
it's
I think it's something, you're right, Helene. If something's critically important, somebody can move that they be appended to the minutes.
exactly, and we could do that. You could always do that.
But I don't think that the world is going to rise or fall on this one. So
My apologies, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna treat Mary's comment as a motion to amend, and unless anybody has a big problem with it, I'm just gonna ask for a vote on the approval of the minutes as amended. Are we good with that? Okay, so on the motion to approve the
Mary.
February 4 minutes. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Ken Collins,
Aye.
Dean Dippold,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins,
Aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and the chair is an aye. Okay, so the next set of minutes that we have are for our meeting on February 18.
Mhm.
I make a motion, we approve it.
Lee moves. Do I have a second?
I get second.
Lean seconds.
I have some changes,
Go ahead, Meg.
just really minor in the liaison assignments. So I am also doing water sewer with Mary. And then for CPC, I'm doing that as well. If Fran wants to do it as well, that's great. I'm happy to have the buddy, but
Sure.
I'm on that.
Okay.
And then for Town Hall Committee, Fran and I are on that, Jean.
Correct.
Right.
You did a great job capturing all that. That was a very chaotic assignment.
Totally.
Okay, so Meg, water and sewer, CPC, Mary and Fran, Town Hall, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Jean.
Okay. I
Yeah,
like-
that's why I put question marks for this exact reason, because there's some cross chatter sometimes.
I was very impressed. You did great. I wasn't even sure what I was on, so you did great.
I might have doubted the veracity of the line in toward the end of Rob H has a list of the meeting as he understands them. You know, good luck with that. But okay, subject to those changes, does anybody else have any changes to this set of minutes? So as amended, we're voting to approve the minutes of the 18th. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Ken Collins.
Not present. I wasn't there.
Oh, you weren't there. Okay. Abstain. I guess. Dean Dippold,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins,
Aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
and Goldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Hi.
and the chair is an aye. So that brings us to the easy ones.
Hey, Rob, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Who just seconded that motion?
It was,
Lead.
Helene.
Ali. Okay.
Lee, then Helene. So moving to the minutes of the joint meeting on February 23rd. Motion?
So moved.
Mary, second. I saw Lee's hand first. Any-
One correction,
One correction.
just the date. It's listed as March 4th, which is today.
Right.
Oh, okay. You know, I'm using the town SharePoint website, which
Oh, yeah, it puts it in there for you.
updates it automatically sometimes, and I just gotta be careful about that.
Right.
I'm still figuring out the town's SharePoint
I
approach.
move that all future documents be done on mimeograph machines.
How about an IBM Selectric? How about that?
Excellent.
Um,
Correction tape.
So we have a motion and a second and a couple of minor corrections. So as corrected, any further discussion? Hearing none. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Ken Collins.
No, I wasn't there.
You weren't there, that's right. Gene Dippold,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins,
aye.
Lean Lieb,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Hi.
and I'm an aye as well. So we, our next meeting is on the 9th. It's a joint meeting with Water and Sewer. We need to post that. Chris, I don't think we're not doing anything unique. Can the office whip up a posting for that, or do you need us to?
Just to be clean, so I don't forget, if you could just shoot it, Tracy and Justine an email to that effect, because that's what you did last time too, so.
So somewhere between.
Sewer also post, I think Water and Sewer also posting too, to be clean.
Is that Water and Sewer presenting to the Board of Selectmen?
And you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, and Rob, we have to post and we have to have a roll call.
I know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was asking
Yeah.
whether they needed me to actually draft something or they could just recycle one other. I'll draft one. It's cleaner that way. So, Mary, when I forget, can you, yeah.
Yeah.
Meg, you had your hand up?
Just a quick question. What are we meant to be there at 6:30 when they start, or do we know yet?
I believe this is first up on the agenda, but it's not until after 7. I think the schedule for 7.
Okay.
What they're likely to do is I'll submit a draft agenda and Chris's office will set up our time to log in and that's when we're there. But yeah, they're usually pretty good about, I hope that they stay on time. We should- Mary?
Chris, are we anticipating documentation from water and sewer prior to?
Yeah, I believe there were some tweaks being circulated today, the budgets. Again, you might just want to poke my office tomorrow morning. Well, Don's just up on the screen, so.
I think that's the czar of finance. Where
The
that's
Czar of Finance.
Well done, Don.
Tracy has all the documents, so you guys should have them by tomorrow.
Awesome.
I think the presentations, at least the presentation on water, was being tweaked a little bit today. So, we should have sir. If you haven't heard anything, Mary, at some point, just poke me to make sure that we're getting it out. I'll be here all afternoon, or someone just if you haven't seen anything. No.
Yeah, Meg and I are meeting with Don on Tuesday morning. So if something hasn't been circulated, that'd be the perfect time. We'll grab it and I can send it out.
It's going to be a budget for each department. There's a presentation on the water rate study. I don't think there's a sewer rate presentation change. No. So there'll be the budget, water and sewer, and then the presentation on the water rate. So.
Yeah, I think the sooner we
Yeah.
get those and the more that we can be prepared. If we can make the 9th useful for our purposes, we may want to revisit it, but just in a very narrow way.
I'm gonna email Tracy right now just to make sure that it's in her mailbox first thing in the morning to get that to you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
so let's see. I think that takes us through. We've approved our minutes. Topics not reasonably anticipated in 24 hours. I don't know of any. We're an advisory.
I'm sorry, Rob, one quick housekeeping. Chris, you still need to tell me how you would like the executive session minutes sent to the town in terms of the final versions. I don't want to forget about that. You had an open question, so just housekeeping.
Yes, and just keep reminding because I haven't talked to council about that at all. So.
Yeah, you can give me a call about that, Chris, if you want. You may have some institutional knowledge. Okay, well, we're a little over time, but not tragically over time. I will warn you that I was looking at a posting by the planning board, and I couldn't understand the posting because it was on a electronic calendar. And I realized that it looked funny because it went over 2 calendar days. They're actually posting meetings that schedule out till 12:30 in the morning.
Oh,
I swear to you that I will never do that.
Thank you.
That's unacceptable. So, but they got to do what they got to do. So God bless them for working hard. But still, it's a startling thing to see. And I've attended, in my professional capacity, meetings have gone past midnight. And we always sit around and say, well, how do we bill for that? You start on the next day's billing sheet and go down. It's never good. So, well, I mean, sometimes it just has to happen, but let's avoid that. So that said, thanks for getting through all this. We need a motion to adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn. You have a question.
Lee, were you moving? Did anybody? Okay, I heard Helene first. I'll take Lee's hand as a second. All in favor of adjournment? Gina Stino,
Aye.
Fran Collins,
Aye.
Dean Dippold,
Aye.
Lee Jenkins.
Aye.
Colleen Lieb,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Bye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and I am in favor of the